Hey, welcome to Anime What Ifs. This is part 8 of What If Naruto Married Temari.
Tsunade frowned as she gazed out of her office window at the village. She hadn't expected something like this, but she knew she should have.
After all, since when was Naruto anything close to normal?
Several hours at the hospital had proven her to be correct. The odd feedback from when she healed Temari had indeed been another faint chakra signature. What was extremely frustrating was that she had failed to cover contraception when she had the talk with Naruto. She just assumed the Kunoichi had known. Unfortunately, and completely obvious in hindsight, Temari had always been intended for a teen with her brothers, and no one had bothered to teach it to her.
Politically, the news was great.
The announcement of an heir to the Uzumaki and Namikaze clans had gone over with cheers and whistles at the council meeting, and the Sunagakure representatives and the Wind and Fire daimyos were all pleased.
On a personal level, Tsunade was convinced that this was a disaster.
She mentally cursed at her earlier thoughts about blonde grandbabies. Just her luck the Gaki would have knocked his wife up on their wedding night. She really wasn't worried about Temari. The girl was fairly level-headed and had taken the news more or less in stride after destroying part of a training ground with her fan. No, the real problem was Naruto. There was no way he was ready for something like this, and add in the fact that a child would make him far more vulnerable as a target.
Cammy, what a mess.
Unable to resist anymore, Tsunade slid her desk drawer open and pulled out her emergency sake and took a pull straight from the jar. She was concerned that Naruto had disappeared after the council meeting, but she had a fairly good idea where he was. Glancing at the Hokage monument, she saw a small dot sitting on the Yandame's head. According to Kakashi, that was where Naruto always retreated when he needed time to think things over. Now that he knows about his heritage, maybe it's also his way of talking with his father, she mused.
Hey Haim, Jiraiya said, hopping in through the window. You know you're pulling me away from valuable research, right?
Can it, you old pervert?
She snapped testily. There are far more important things now than you peeping. Jiraiya dropped his facade, showing the serious shinobi hidden beneath his usual exterior. I've heard. He sighed.
It's all over town already, and I'd bet anything Iwa and Kumo will know by the end of the day. This is not a good thing, Tsunade. This increases the danger he is in by a considerable amount. By himself or even just married, Naruto is really only threatened by Akatsuki. Add a child, even unborn, to the mix and I can see Kumo attempting to take the bloodline for themselves. Iwa will just want to crush it. Tsunade rubbed her temples as she replied.
Yes, I'm aware of the problems. The question is, what do we do about it?
We push him, Haim, we drive him to be as strong as he possibly can be, as fast as we possibly can.
There are extreme risks to that, Tsunade said with a frown. Push him too hard, he breaks and we lose him.
Standing up and heading out the window, Jiraiya paused, hand on the windowsill.
Sometimes you just have to have a little faith, Haim.
The Gaki is much stronger than most believe, all we have to do is help him along.
He flashed her a pained smile. We owe him at least that much, don't you think? Tsunade watched Jiraiya leave silently. I guess the pervert's right. If anyone can handle this, it's Naruto. Still, I can't help but worry.
Naruto sat on his father's head, idly spinning a Hiraishin kunai as he watched the sun set over the village. He was terribly confused and unbalanced, and he had hoped sitting on his father's head would help clear his head. Chuckling, he patted the stone with his free hand.
Doesn't really work like that, does it, Tusan?
It wasn't like he was expecting the stone head to talk back, but it really was his only connection with his father other than the fox, and frankly, he really preferred the monument.
A rustle of cloth alerted him to company, and he instantly snapped alert when he didn't recognize the chakra.
Whipping to his feet, he dropped into a guard stance as he carefully scanned his surroundings. Just within the tree line was a tall, bulky man in strange red armor that seemed to be emitting steam. Between the scratch in his Iwagakure Hitayate and the ominous aura, Naruto knew why he was there.
Ah shit, the last time I felt something like this, Gaara was trying to kill me. Don't tell me. he thought. Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto. Son of Konoha no Kiroi Senko. I am Han.
The man's voice was impossibly deep for someone his size.
For the crimes of your clan, you shall die.
The man charged forward with a punch that shattered the kunai Naruto tried to parry with. Staring briefly at the shattered kunai, Naruto realized that he was in serious trouble. The power it would take to simply break a Hiraishin kunai was considerable, and this man had just shattered one.
Why is it always me?
He thought bitterly as he hurriedly evaded the furious onslaught. Flipping back to gain some space, Naruto released his gravity seals and formed the sign for his favorite technique.
Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu.
Han paused as his target suddenly multiplied. The Namikaze Brat's technique was impressive, but he simply began popping clones as they charged. He was forced to use his steam to shield himself when the brat somehow combined wind and fire jutsu to send a firestorm at him. Naruto observed with narrowed eyes as Han deflected his clones' combined Gokakyu and Daitapa with what appeared to be steam.
What the hell? Steam?
Fortunately, the steam provided him with an opportunity, and the clones nearest to Han rapidly ran through hand seals.
Suetun Suro no Jutsu.
The clones called out, condensing the steam into the water prison Zabuza had used against Kakashi in Wave.
Seeing Han trapped, several clones charged and slammed Razengans into the man. Shit! Mud clone!
Naruto swore when the trapped figure dissolved. Releasing the water prison, Naruto and his clones carefully searched their surroundings. A sudden burst of chakra was his only warning, and he barely rolled out of the way as Han erupted from the ground beneath him.
Han watched as Naruto flipped back to his feet from his evasive roll. Very impressive for one so young. He stated calmly.
I had hoped to do this quietly, but I see I have no choice. Naruto stared in horror as a bluish-white aura surrounded Han, one chakra tail swaying behind him.
Fuck! He thought, he is a Jinchuriki. What one is he?
He only knew Han could not be the one tail or the 9 tails. The honor or curse belonged to Gaara and himself. Holding his hand up, palm facing Han, Naruto called out.
Stop, I do not wish to fight you, brother. Han's deep voice had more than an undercurrent of rage as he replied. Brother? You are no brother of mine.
How dare you call yourself such?
I see that you are a Jinchuriki, like me. I do not wish to fight my own kind. Naruto replied sadly. Jinchuriki?
Han muttered in disbelief. So the great Namikaze couldn't resist making a Jinchuriki himself, could he?
Preaching peace, then creating a weapon, what a hypocrite. Don't talk about my father like that. Naruto roared back. My father sealed the Kyuubi into me to save the village at the cost of his life. Please. Han sneered back. The Kyuubi could have been sealed some other way, just like the other Biju. The only reason they are ever sealed into humans is to create a weapon for the village. You're wrong. Naruto cried. Perhaps, Han conceded. But it won't be a concern for you after tonight.
Even with his gravity seals off, Naruto was barely able to Kawarimi in time to avoid the bone-crushing kick Han slammed into him. Shit. He's a hell of a lot faster now, Naruto thought in a near panic. Deciding to stall, Naruto hid himself among his clones as he considered and discarded various attack plans. He ran out of time when Han slammed his fist into the ground and the shockwave dispelled his clones and threw him back through the air. Naruto's flight was stopped as he slammed into what appeared to be a wall of sand. Shaking his head to clear the ringing caused by that last attack, Naruto saw Gaara standing next to him, arms crossed in his brother-in-law's favorite pose.
Naruto. The boy said calmly. Do you require assistance? Gaara. Naruto cried out happily. Thank Kami. Yes, he's a Jinchuriki. Gaara nodded. Yes, that much is obvious.
The beast is raging in my head over the power being used.
Ah, Gaara, you aren't gonna go all insane on me, are you?
Naruto asked cautiously as Han paused to size up this new addition to the fight.
Be at ease, Naruto, I am here to help you. Gaara responded. Dropping back into a battle stance, Naruto looked relieved. That's great. Let's get him! He cried as he charged back into the fight. Han was forced back onto the defensive as Gaara and Naruto teamed up against him. His power was enough that Gaara couldn't trap him with his sand, but whenever he was forced to break out, he would find Naruto or a clone waiting with a Rasengan. The boys almost had him when Naruto, after quickly consulting with Gaara, decided to melt the sand into glass as Gaara trapped Han. Several Gukakyu, used by clones surrounding Han, managed to entrap the man in a glass prison. Standing next to Gaara, Naruto panted as he tried to regain his breath. There were times that he greatly envied Gaara's "I'll just stand here and kill you with sand" approach to battle. A sudden surge of chakra snapped his head back to the glass prison and he cursed when Han broke free. The sudden change in his opponent's appearance disturbed Naruto a great deal. Han was no longer a tall man in red armor. Instead, facing off against the boys was something else, something very frightening. A dark chakra cloak surrounded a quadrupedal figure. Chakra horns protruded from its head and 5 tails swung behind it, tearing the ground as they lashed. Gaara, Naruto said quietly, I think we're in trouble. Gaara simply nodded. The figure that had once been Han formed a ball and appeared to swallow it. Shit! Naruto screamed in terror. I've read about this, by Jidama, get out of the way. Shoving Gaara away from the attack, Naruto tried to dodge but was hit by the fringes of the attack, slamming him into a tree. Sliding down the trunk, Naruto stared in horror at the devastation caused by that single attack. A long trench started from where Han was standing and continued as far as Naruto could see through the forest away from the village. Kami, it's a good thing I didn't dodge towards the village, he thought in shock. Gaara appeared by his side, bringing his attention back to the fight. Gaara, we have to get him away from the village, Naruto said, determination blazing in his eyes. Gaara nodded his agreement and the boys took to the trees to lead their fellow Jinchuriki away from the village. In the village, alarms blared as shinobi rushed to get the civilians into shelters. The roof of the Hokage Tower was the nerve center of the village defense. Tsunade, Jiraiya and the highest-ranking officers were watching the battle using the Sandy Ames old crystal ball. Damn it, Jiraiya! Tsunade snapped at her teammate. Why can't we go assist Naruto? Haim, it's a fight between Jinchuriki and one of them has already begun using Biju Chakra. Any normal shinobi that tries to enter that fight will just be killed by the toxicity of that chakra. We already sent him the help we can give him when we sent Gaara. Right now, all we can do is protect the civilians and the village. Jiraiya didn't look pleased with his own words. He was worried that Tsunade might hit him and being dispelled would alert Tsunade that Jiraiya wasn't actually there. The orders to protect the village and stay out of the fight were ignored by a certain blonde kunoichi. Gripping her fan tightly, Temari hurried to assist her brother and her husband. There was simply no way she was going to let her family fight without her. Naruto and Gaara stopped when they reached a clearing filled with sand. Looking around, Naruto shot Gaara an amused glance. Well, this seems familiar. Yes, quite an ironic place to fight. Gaara replied with the usual small twitch of his mouth showing his own amusement. Yeah well, I'm just glad you're on my side this time, Naruto said, getting his game face back on as Han arrived at the far end of the clearing. Gaara nodded as the boys observed the further change in Han's appearance. Sometime during the chase, Han had fully manifested and facing the boys was the full form of the gobi. It resembled some sort of horse with an odd elongated head, horns randomly jutting from it. 5 tails swung wildly behind it and it seemed to glare with malevolence at Naruto. So, you can turn into a giant sand thing, and he can turn into that horse thing. Am I the only Jinchuriki that can't or something? Naruto whined at Gaara. Naruto, Gaara said calmly. Whine later, fight now. Yeah, it just seems so unfair, Naruto complained. Can you go full form and stay sane? Yes, Shikaku is not released unless I use the false sleep jutsu. Alright, I think you had better do that. I'll summon Gamabunta. Biting his thumb and channeling as much chakra as he could, Naruto slammed his hand down. Kuchiyos no Jutsu. The large plume of smoke cleared to reveal Naruto standing on Gamabunta's head. Jiraiya, why have you summoned me? The humongous toad yelled. Boss. Naruto called to him. Erosenin didn't call you. I did. Rolling his eye up, Bunta puffed his pipe. Naruto? Why have you summoned me? Pointing at the goby, Naruto yelled impatiently. Mostly 'cause that thing is trying to kill me. Gamabunta eyed the goby, and did a quick double take when Gaara in his full Shikaku form moved to his side. Gripping his blade, Gamabunta made to draw it and drive it through the sand but was stopped by Naruto. No boss, Gaara is with us this time. Is that so? You always find such interesting fights, Gaki. Gaara's voice boomed from his sand construct. Naruto, I will move to occupy him. You and your summon find an appropriate time to strike. Gotcha, Gaara. Naruto called as he moved to engage the goby. You got any ideas, boss? 'Cause I've hit this guy with pretty much everything I've got so far. We could try a collaboration technique. Do you know any fire jutsu? Gamabunta asked as he dove forward attempting to strike with his tanto. Yeah, Naruto yelled, I know Gokakyu. Will that work? Jumping back as Gaara physically grappled with the goby, Gamabunta responded, that should be perfect. When I use my jutsu, you need to light the oil with your fire. Gaara, get clear. As Gaara backed off, Gamabunta spewed a stream of oil as Naruto created a fireball. Katan, Gokakyu no Jutsu using the full seals and calling the jutsu allowed Naruto to create a much larger fireball than usual. It ignited the oil stream, creating a jet of flame that struck the goby dead center. Naruto's shout of triumph was cut short when a tail came flying out of the smoke. Gamabunta managed to deflect the blow from Naruto but took the hit in his shoulder. Boss, you okay? Naruto yelled worriedly as Gaara moved back in to occupy the goby. I'll be fine, Gaki, Gamabunta boomed back, but I need to return and heal. Grabbing Naruto with his tongue, Gamabunta placed Naruto on the ground then dispelled. Not one to say out of a fight, Naruto bounded up to stand on Gaara's Shikaku form. Gaara, you got any ideas? 'Cause I can't seem to hurt this thing. Naruto called from his new perch. Gaara emerged from the sand next to Naruto. I can bring out Shikaku. He offered. Naruto stared at Gaara in disbelief. I would really prefer not to. We may not have much choice. A Biju may be the only option. Gaara, Shikaku possibly hates me even more than he hates you. Let's call that a last resort. I have an idea. Buy me some time. What do you plan to do? Gaara questioned, launching more sand shuriken at the goby. I'm going to talk to the fox. Naruto responded as he sat down on the sand. Rushing through the sewer, Naruto quickly arrived at the Kyuubi's prison. Rattling the bars, Naruto yelled, Oi, fox, wake up. Well, hello, warden. The fox sneered at him. I assume you're here for your rent? Look, I don't have time to fight with you. Naruto yelled back at the fox. I assume you know what's happening? The fox snorted. Of course I do, mortal. You got yourself into a fight with the goby and now you need my help because you are a pathetic fool of a mortal. Gritting his teeth, Naruto banged his forehead on the bars. Yeah, that sounds about right, you egotistical team of a fox. Now, can you help or are you really that worthless? He sneered back. Silence, you fool. The fox roared back. It is not my doing that has landed us in this mess, but I suppose I cannot have that five-tailed freak claim victory over me. You may have your chakra, now leave. A wave of red chakra shoved Naruto back out of his mind. Opening his eyes, Naruto was seeing red, quite literally.
Glancing behind him, he noticed a red chakra tail bubbling and his hands appeared to be claws. Jumping off Gaara, Naruto began to claw and rip his way around the forelegs of the gobi in an almost berserker-like state. Unlike earlier wounds that healed instantly, the damage Naruto was inflicting with his claws stayed open and seemed to bleed chakra. Elated at finally being able to harm his foe, Naruto charged a Rasengan and slammed it into the leg in front of him. He was rewarded when the leg buckled and the gobi screamed in pain. Gaara, always a combat pragmatist, immediately enclosed the limb in sand and crushed it. A sadistic smile crossed his face as he and Naruto gained the upper hand in the fight. It seemed he could always find a good fight with Naruto around. Back in the village, a small crowd that had gathered around the viewing orb cheered as the boys began to take charge of the fight. Most of the Jonin watching the fight had been extremely worried when Naruto and Gaara couldn't seem to make damage stick to the Biju. They could feel the chakra flares from the fight clearly even at this distance, and most were amazed at the power being used. There had been concern when Naruto manifested a chakra tail. A fight involving a Biju certainly brought back memories of the Kyuubi attack even 13 years later. It was obvious from his actions that the boy was in control, which greatly reduced those fears. After all, it was highly unlikely Kyuubi knew how to use a Rasengan. For the few Sunigakure Jonin watching, the fact that Gaara was fully manifested but working with an ally was very welcome news. Many in Sunigakure had been highly suspicious when Gaara returned from the failed invasion and began trying to work his way through the shinobi ranks. The drop in body count was welcome, but many were very cautious in believing Gaara had truly reformed.
The current battle was proof that Gaara had indeed changed, and several prominent Sunigakure Jonin began to consider the currently empty Kazekage position thoughtfully. Having finished one of the gobi's legs, Naruto and Gaara focused on the other foreleg. If they could cripple it, the fight was more or less done. Naruto, excited and running on the Kyuubi's bloodlust, mistakenly moved into a position where the gobi could swipe at him with its tails. He was saved from a great deal of pain when a sudden wind slammed into the attacking tail, driving it back. Glancing over, Naruto saw Temari standing in a tree near the edge of the clearing, her fan held ready. His wife was obviously frightened. Two fully manifested Biju and another chakra-cloaked Jinchuriki were the stuff of nightmares for normal shinobi. A long-range fighter, Temari was obviously not going to get in close, but she was still here, fighting with her family. Back in Konoha, Tsunade was cursing the fool girl. She was going to get herself killed and then the shit would well and truly hit the fan. News of her pregnancy had already spread. If she died, a war with Sunigakure was all but unavoidable, and to that end, they had allies in Kumogakure and Iwagakure. On a personal level, Tsunade liked the girl, and couldn't imagine what her death would do to Naruto. For the first time in many years, Tsunade found herself praying to whatever deities might be listening for the girl's safety. "Please, just stay alive, all three of you," she pleaded in her mind. Confident Temari had his back, Naruto dived back into the fight. The gobi had wised up and wasn't allowing him time for more than quick hit and run slashes at its leg. Several times, Naruto had close calls, saved by timely attacks from his wife hidden back in the trees. Seeing Naruto stalemated, Gaara moved in on the gobi's opposite side, forcing the Biju to divide its attention. The gobi still had enough power to deflect Gaara's attacks, but it couldn't afford to ignore him. His sand was still very dangerous if unchecked. From her perch in the trees, Temari saw what her brother was doing and worried. It was true that Naruto needed a diversion to strike even with her covering him, but with Gaara on the other side, she was worried about possibly harming him. Her eyes widened and she dropped to the ground seeking cover when she saw the horse-looking thing create a giant ball of chakra and eat it. She didn't know what it was doing, but she didn't think it was a good thing. The released Baijidama cored through Gaara's sand, leaving a smoking glass hole through the body of his Shikaku form. It was fortunate for Gaara that the sand absorbed the blow and sheltered him from the strike, but he was out of the fight until he could reform most of his sand torso. He was just glad the gobi hadn't aimed for the head. That attack would have killed him. Naruto growled as the gobi focused all its attention on him. He was forced to simply dodge and avoid a wide variety of strikes from its leg, its tails, and its head. This did not allow for him to attack, and he felt his frustration mounting rapidly. Inside the seal,
Kyubi was watching the events with a great deal of interest. He was stuck here until he could find some way around or through the Shinigami seal, and loath though he was to admit it, his current container was at least more interesting than the previous two. The Ningen was doing fairly well against the Gobi, which was good. It would be unseemly for the Kyubi no Kitsune to be defeated by that five-tailed horse freak. As Naruto was forced to stay on the defensive, Kyubi glared at the bars holding it.
If only it was free to put that thing in its place. Gaara finally managed to fill the hole in his sand torso and rejoined the battle. The Gobi was not expecting him to recover that fast, and its mistake cost it the use of one of its tails. Gaara managed to crush it before the Gobi began to counter his attacks again. Naruto, freed up by Gaara rejoining the fight, was finally able to slam a Rasengan into the Gobi's other foreleg.
Denied the use of its front legs, the Gobi crashed to the ground, tails flailing violently.
As both Gaara and Naruto moved in for the kill, the Gobi proved it was still dangerous with a concentrated chakra pulse that destroyed Gaara's sand body.
Seeing his brother-in-law falling, Naruto dashed over and caught the red head before he hit the ground. Seeing that Gaara was fine, Naruto turned back to the Gobi with a savage growl as he attacked. Out of chakra, Gaara retreated to his sister's position in the trees.
"Temari," he said wearily. "You shouldn't be here."
Temari spared a glance from the battle at her brother. The only time she had even seen Gaara look this worn was after his fight with Naruto in the invasion.
"Sorry, little brother,"
she said, turning her attention back to the battle and getting ready to launch another attack. "There was no way I was going to let my boys fight something like this without me." Gaara stared at her, confused. He was happy that his sister had come to fight with him, but he was afraid for her safety. Shaking his head to clear his confusion, he sank down on the branch to meditate. Since he could not sleep without Shikaku devouring his mind and soul, he learned to meditate after his defeat by Naruto to rest his body and mind. What interested him now was that as a side effect, it allowed him to regain his chakra much faster than he would otherwise, much like the restorative powers of sleep for normal shinobi. Naruto was getting tired and even more frustrated. He could hit and hurt the Gobi, but he was nowhere near landing a finishing blow. The only true weak point he could see was possibly its face, but the head was still dangerous. Tch, it's like one of those final boss battles in those RPGs Shikamaru likes to play.
If only this thing had an arrow pointing at its weaknesses. To make matters worse, even with Kyubi's chakra, he was getting tired. He couldn't keep this up for long. He also couldn't break off to rest because the Gobi would use the time to heal. For the first time in the battle, Naruto found himself pretty much out of moves, and that worried him considerably. Sensing its attacker weakening, the Gobi decided to strike the irritants in the trees with its tails. This turned out to be a fatal mistake. Seeing the tails lash towards his wife and brother-in-law, Naruto in his anger drew forth far more of the Kyubi's chakra. A second tail formed behind the speeding figure as he intercepted the tail aimed at his family. "Don't you dare touch them!" he roared as he tore the tail completely off the Gobi. Using the extra power, Naruto overcharged a Rasengan with the Kyubi's chakra, and moving so fast he was a crimson blur slammed it through the Gobi's chest. Screaming in pain, Han was forced out of his fully manifested form and driven to his knees. Clutching weakly at the ground, he began to laugh bitterly at his defeat by children. Standing over him, Naruto began to form a Rasengan to finish Han when his chakra cloak dropped. Without Kyubi's chakra boosting him, Naruto fell straight onto his face in front of Han. As he dropped unconscious, seeing Temari's worried face, the last sound he heard was "Sabako Soso," followed by a sickening crunch. Hidden in the trees, Jiraiya allowed himself a small smile. For a moment he thought he would have to interfere, but the Gaki was improving very well. Glancing at the barely visible Hokage monument, he dipped his head. "You would be proud, Minato." Hope you liked this episode. The next one is coming soon.